Some legal analysis. Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney, Fox News contributor. Andy, good morning to you. We're throwing a lot at our viewers. In fact, a lot is coming at us every day and every hour. Where should we put our eyes today?
I think the best place, Bill, would be Capitol Hill, where we just heard from Catherine. That's where the action is. And when I say that, I say it because we understand that the president is going to submit this letter to the House. I think it's the right thing for him to do. The Constitution reposes the power to impeach solely in the House, not in the Speaker of the House, in the House. And it actually would benefit the House, even though, as Speaker Pelosi says, there's nothing in the Constitution that requires that they take a vote before they do an impeachment inquiry. If they want to go into court and try to enforce any information demands. And as I've pointed out, we don't have subpoenas at the moment. What Pompeo has is basically letters from Congress asking for assistance. But if they want to go into court and try to enforce these information demands, the first thing a court's going to want to know is, has the House voted to have an impeachment inquiry? And a lot hinges on that, including how much expansion a court would give a president's claim of executive privilege and privilege over matters that are in the president's duties under Article 2. So I think she's right. They don't have to have a vote. There's nothing that requires them to have a vote. But if this is going to be real, if they really have grounds to seek the president's impeachment, they not only should have a vote because it's in their interest when they go to court to have a vote, they should be proud to have a vote. If they really think there are grounds to remove the President of the United States from power, then the House should speak as one, as an institution, and vote that way.
Yeah. How about this? Do you see a smoking gun lurking, whether obvious or not? If you were the president watching all this, what would concern you the most?
Well, I'd be most concerned about the way Americans are consuming the coverage. You know, there's a lot of reporting that's simply inaccurate about what's going on. For example, this whole idea that there is an impeachment inquiry, there's not. The idea that there are subpoenas, there aren't. The whole thing, this is all kabuki theater at this point. And I think a lot of people are, you know, consuming it as if it were true on face value. And I really think if I were the White House, what I would be worried about is breaking through that.
I'm not quite sure I'm entirely clear on what you're saying there. If you're the White House, you're concerned about what specifically?
Well, I'm concerned, for example, let's take one thing, the term quid pro quo, right? There's always quid pro quo when foreign countries deal with each other. The issue is not whether there was a quid pro quo. It would be bizarre if two countries were dealing with each other and it wasn't an exchange. They're always pursuing their interests. The question here is, was there a corrupt quid pro quo? That is, was the president leveraging his power over foreign affairs exclusively to get the Ukrainians basically to work on the Trump 2020 campaign? On the other hand, if what the president was actually doing was trying to leverage the Ukrainians to assist in Attorney General Barr's legitimate Justice Department investigation into the investigations that were attendant to the 2016 campaign, that's not only normal, it's entirely appropriate. But if it's pitched to the public as if, was there a quid pro quo about 2016, what the public is taking from that is that the suggestion that there was a corrupt, improper deal. And that is brought to them in the context of being told that there's an impeachment inquiry over it and that there are subpoenas pending demanding that the executive branch turn over information that it's withholding about this corrupt.
You know, the way you frame that, it's almost as if the Bill Clinton matter came down to the definition of the meaning of the word is. And what you're describing here is it may come down to a question of whether or not it was 2016 or 2020. I'm going to get a better answer on that in a moment. Not a better, but a more complete answer. Andy, we're going to put you on pause here because we've got a ton of questions. So hang on. We'll back to you in a few minutes.